AITA for telling my brother that if our stepsister aren't his siblings, then neither am I. My 19F mother got married to my stepfather 3 years ago. He has 2 daughters, 13, 9, and I love them and don't even call them stepsisters. My brother, 16M, never really accepted our momre marring, or the move to a new town and school, even though we were much better off money-wise. He still calls our stepfather his mom's husband. I just call him my dad. Bio dad's a cheating slimeball. He never listens to a thing dad says, which means she's spent most of the last 2 years grounded. Anda refuses to even call his sisters his stepsisters, they're just his mom's husband's kids. He openly says he has no love for them, thought they never will, and even said when he has his own family he'll never invite them to anything. I got sick of this during winter break when I was home again. I told him they're his sisters as much as I am, and if he doesn't consider them as such then I'm not his sister either. I told our parent team not coming home for spring break this year, and that until he fixes his attitude and apologizes I'm not going to be in the same room as him. Apparently he decided to go live with sperm donor, and at his age the courts will basically let him. If that's the company he wants then I say good riddance, but mom's been pretty upset about it. Still I don't think I was wrong, but it's possible I went too far. AITA for telling my parents I don't want kids because I'm scared they will turn out like my brother. My older brother is unemployed, had almost always been unemployed and has no intention to ever work. His life plan is to live off of our mother until she dies, then our father if he happens to live longer, then live off his inheritance. Or maybe he will try to mooch off of another relative, I don't know. Our parents have tried to get him to work, they did everything in their power to arrange him job positions where he didn't even have to interview, but no. He always comes up with an excuse to why that job is not good enough for him. He is my brother, so I love him of course, but at the same time, I'm ashamed of him and with how his actions hurt our parents. I turned 30 this week and we celebrated it with my family yesterday. My mom said she was 30 when she had me and asked me when my husband and I will have kids. I told her I'm not sure if I'm up to the job, raising children seems too difficult to me. She asked what I meant and I told her that I don't think I would be able to properly parent a child, correct their misbehaviors and deal with them possibly not living up to my expectations, which is not fair to the child either. She pressed further and my father joined in, acting like they don't understand what I mean. Up until I finally told them that I'm afraid my child would turn out like my brother for example, and I don't think I could deal with that. They got quiet for a second and I saw that they finally understood what I meant. The problem that even though my brother was having a different conversation with one of our cousins, he heard what I said, looked at me, said, "Nice," and walked out. Our parents said that I shouldn't have said what I said, even though they admit they pressured me to explain and understand my concerns. Because it's already really hard to get my brother to come to family events and now I made it even worse. Want me to apologize to him? I didn't mean for him to hear that and I feel bad, but seriously, he is a 34-year-old man refusing to get a job. I think it's time we stop coddling him. AITA?
AITA for walking out of the kitchen and going to play video games whenever my wife tries to help me prepare food. I love my wife very much. She is a smart and capable woman who leaves me on the dust in most categories. My wife cannot cook. At all. She burned water once. She was boiling water for rice and it had oil in it. She got distracted and the water boiled off. Then the oil caught fire. Then she threw water on it and nearly burned down her parents' house. She can follow instructions on microwave food. She can use the microwave to reheat leftovers. That's about it. Her mom and dad gave up trying to teach her. I love cooking. I enjoy making tasty meals from scratch when I'll have the time. One of my go-to meals is fried chicken thighs and waffles. I use my dad's waffle recipe. Come out light and crispy. Perfect. I don't always make them though because it takes time. I cheat sometimes and use premix. They are heavier and kind of floppy, not crisp. So I'm making breakfast yesterday and the kids ate at the table. I have the chicken going and I'm making waffles. It's a good morning. My wife decided to help and covered the waffles in foil so they stayed warm. They did. They also steamed and got soft. So I finished making myself a waffle and served my food and left the kitchen. She can finish everything off. She does this constantly. I will be making steaks and I'm resting them and she throws them back on the grill to keep warm. I'll have the chicken fully cooked and tender and she will turn up the heat and dry it out, just to make sure. I am sure. She came up to me yesterday for the 50th time and asked why I always walk away when she tries to help. I explained for the 50th time that I enjoy making good food, and that her help is universally detrimental to the meal I'm trying to make. She thinks I'm an *asshole for caring so much about how food feels and tastes. I think she can do whatever she wants on the days that it is her turn to cook. AITA?
AITA for telling my husband and ILs that our children do not need to attend their older sister's housewarming party? My husband and I have 3 biological children together. He adopted my child from a prior relationship and I am a stepmother to his adult child. My husband was divorced from my stepdaughter's mom. She was 8 when my husband and I became serious and my son was still a baby. Not long after my stepdaughter's mom died. My husband and I had talked about marrying before she died. We delayed it for a couple of years to allow my stepdaughter time to grieve and adjust to the changes in her life. This was with the help of therapy, of course. We knew a child who lost someone so close would need extra help. Now my stepdaughter is 20, my son is 12 and our children together are 7, 6 and 4. So what happened here is my stepdaughter and her boyfriend recently moved into a house together. She asked for help setting up their dining room and we all went over to help her. Her house was covered in photos. The landing had them, living room, kitchen, etc. There was not a single photo of her siblings in the house, or me, but it was not seeing one of the kids that led to this. She had her parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, her cousins, and friends. But there was no sign of the kids anywhere. All of the photos with her dad were older ones, from before we met. My 12-year-old, 7 and 6-year-olds noticed because they were excited to look around her house. I couldn't help but notice because her boyfriend had so many of his siblings sand because there were some, what felt like deliberate choices, to make sure she used photos that didn't contain her siblings. Including extended family photos from years ago with my husband's side that were taken before her dad and I met. And we know she has photos with her siblings. I always knew she wasn't super crazy about her siblings. I always hoped as she got older she would feel love for them. But it feels like she doesn't think of them as family or as special enough to be included. The 3 kids who noticed were hurt. My husband tried to assure them it was likely an oversight on her part and he called her the next day to ask. She said she had only wanted photos with people she considered family and she didn't consider us family. We were all invited to her housewarming party. But the kids did not want to go. My husband and I were shocked and said they had to go, of course. I argued that they didn't and I told him I would stay home with them. They argued back to me that the kids needed to be. I said they did not need to bother and I wouldn't force them to go when they already feel hurt. My husband and ILs think I'm unreasonable. AITA?
AITA for having a better wedding than my sil? I'm a casual Reddit browser but have never engaged the community before because I never thought something this wild would happen. But here where? I'm 29F, from a middle-class family and have an older brother, 35M. Let's call him Adrian. He is a self-taught software engineer and makes pretty good money. A little over 1 year ago, he married his girlfriend, 28F, of 6 years. Let's call her Heather. She's not a bad person, but I think she's a little bit spoiled. She's the type that loves to brag about all the expensive stuff her husband bought her and their wedding was pretty extravagant. She still loves to talk about how it was the most amazing wedding she's ever been to. My brother is wrapped around her finger, but it never really mattered until now. I met my fiancé, 36M, about 4 years ago. It was a business event and he owns a decently sized and very successful company. So saying that, he's extremely wealthy. Since he grew up less than hell loves to spend his money on things him and his family could only dream about before. One of those things is, of course, our wedding. He wants to go all out and hired a somewhat well-known wedding planner to arrange everything. Honestly, I'm pretty excited. I never dreamed of such a luxurious wedding, but now that it's happening it feels like I'm living some wild dream I never even dared have. Like textbook fairy tale. Recently I was at a family gathering and hanging out in the living room with my mom and Heather doing girl talk. My mom started asking me how the planning was going, and when I told her about everything we were doing I could see Heather go pale and then extremely red in the face. She was quiet for the rest of the night. The next day, Adrian called me and said that Heather was extremely upset and felt like I was trying to one-up her wedding. She said I was trying to upstage her because I never expressed desire for a fancy wedding before. He asked me if we could tone it down so it doesn't exceed the budget they had for their own wedding. I laughed because honestly I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then I naturally said no. He sounded upset, and a few hours later Heather calls and she starts yelling at me, repeating mostly the same stuff, saying she knew I was always jealous of her and I'm only with my fiancé because he's rich and I want to rub it in her face. That made me snap, and I said, if you're that obsessed with money, maybe you should have married someone else instead of my brother. If anyone's jealous of someone, it's you. She screamed at me and started crying before hanging up. Now Adrian is angry and calling me an for insinuating she shouldn't have married him, and my parents think I was too harsh on her when I know she's always been material, and are asking me to lower our wedding budget to appease her. I don't want to. My fiancé definitely doesn't want to. I don't know if that makes me an or not.